3 nights before my ex-husband's wedding, his bride called me. "Is this Caroline Mercer?" "Yes." She lowered her voice. "Grant told me you destroyed your marriage, but I found something with your name on it. And now I don't believe him." Before I could ask what she had found, she said, "Please come to the wedding, and whatever happens, don't tell Grant we spoke." Then she ended the call. On Saturday, Grant introduced me to the guests as the woman who couldn't keep a marriage. His bride looked directly at him and said, "That isn't what you told me." 3 nights before my ex-husband's wedding, his bride called me. Her voice was barely above a whisper. She confirmed my name, introduced herself as Natalie, then said, "I found something Grant never expected me to see, and your name is on it." 2 weeks earlier, Grant had mailed me a wedding invitation. Inside, he had written, "Come see what a real wife looks like." That was exactly his style, polished enough to impress strangers, cruel enough to make me question myself. Grant had spent 5 years telling everyone I destroyed our marriage. According to him, I was irresponsible, dishonest, and impossible to trust. His story sounded convincing because he had prepared it long before I realized our savings were disappearing. I asked Natalie what she had discovered, but she refused to explain over the phone. "Grant checks everything," she whispered. "If he learns I contacted you, the proof may disappear. Please come Saturday and act like we've never spoken." I should have refused. That family had already taken my marriage, my home, and most of my friends. But Natalie's fear sounded painfully familiar. It was the same fear I once heard in my own voice when nobody believed me. The wedding was held at a private lakeside club outside Chicago. When I entered the ballroom, conversations softened and familiar faces turned toward me. Grant's relatives looked delighted, as if my humiliation had been added to the evening's entertainment. Grant approached beside the seating chart, wearing the confident smile that once fooled me. He kissed my cheek without permission and whispered, "I'm glad you came, Caroline. Just don't create another financial disaster before dessert." His father, Richard, appeared moments later. Unlike Grant, he wasn't smiling. His attention dropped to the leather document case beneath my arm, and the color slowly left his face. That was when I knew Natalie's discovery involved him too. The music changed, and Natalie entered in her wedding gown. She didn't look at Grant first. Her eyes searched the room until they found mine. Then she touched her bracelet twice, the private signal we had arranged. During the reception, Grant gathered several guests around us. "This is Caroline," he announced, laughing, "the woman who couldn't keep a marriage." Natalie turned toward him, her expression suddenly cold. "That isn't what you told me," she said. "Welcome back to the channel, where family secrets are exposed and betrayal always has a price." "My name is Caroline Mercer. I'm 34 years old and I'm from Evanston, Illinois. Before we begin, subscribe and tell me in the comments, would you attend your ex-husband's wedding after receiving an invitation like mine?" Grant laughed as if Natalie had made a joke, but his eyes immediately moved toward her. "What exactly did I tell you?" he asked. Natalie smiled for the guests and replied, "We can discuss that after the photographs." Watching them reminded me of our own wedding 9 years earlier. Grant had seemed thoughtful, ambitious, and protective. His father welcomed me warmly, but only after asking detailed questions about my salary, savings, and credit score. During our first 3 years together, Grant controlled every household payment. He called it convenience because I worked long hours at an insurance company. I trusted him completely until ordinary purchases began getting declined without explanation. Whenever I questioned him, Grant produced neat spreadsheets showing expenses I supposedly made. The numbers looked convincing, but I didn't recognize several stores. He insisted stress was affecting my memory, and slowly, I started believing him. At the wedding, a server handed Natalie a sealed envelope. She glanced at the handwriting, then quickly placed it beneath her bouquet. Richard noticed. He stepped toward her, but the photographer called everyone outside before he could interfere. During the photographs, Grant positioned me at the edge of the group. "Let's document the before and after," he joked. Some relatives laughed, but Natalie quietly moved beside me, leaving Grant standing alone between us. As the camera flashed, Natalie whispered without moving her lips, "Someone searched my apartment yesterday." Before I could respond, Grant wrapped his arm around her waist and asked why his new wife looked so nervous. Natalie blamed the wedding pressure, but Grant kept studying her. Across the lawn, Richard spoke urgently into his phone while watching us. When he noticed me looking, he turned away and walked toward the private offices. 5 years earlier, Grant had behaved the same way before our marriage collapsed. He became attentive, checked my phone constantly, and appeared everywhere, unexpectedly. At the time, I mistook surveillance for concern. I wouldn't make that mistake again. When the guests returned inside, Natalie's sealed envelope was missing. She searched beneath the table, growing increasingly pale. Then my phone vibrated with a blocked message. "Leave the wedding now, or she learns what you did." I showed Natalie the threatening message beneath the table. Instead of looking frightened, she looked angry. "That's the same number that warned me not to investigate you," she whispered. Someone wanted both of us suspicious of each other. Before we could compare messages, Grant approached and took Natalie's phone. He claimed the wedding coordinator needed her attention, but I noticed him checking her recent calls. Fortunately, she had already deleted my number. After my divorce, I spent 2 years repairing the credit Grant said I had ruined. That process changed my career. I left insurance administration, completed fraud examination training, and learned how easily convincing paperwork could hide an ugly truth. The first strange clue had appeared during my divorce. One account listed my correct social security number but used an email address I had never seen. Grant called it a clerical mistake, and my attorney dismissed it as irrelevant. At the reception, Natalie led me toward the women's lounge. Inside, she admitted something unexpected. Grant hadn't told her he was inviting me. She discovered the invitation only after finding its duplicate in his desk. Natalie had mailed my invitation herself, including Grant's cruel handwritten message exactly as she found it. She needed him to believe his plan was working, but neither of us understood why he wanted me at the wedding. Before Natalie could explain more, her sister entered and warned us that Richard was looking for her. She also slipped Natalie a small brass key, saying, "I found this beneath your bouquet after the envelope disappeared." The key belonged to one of the club's private lockers. Natalie wanted to open it immediately, but I stopped her. A missing envelope and a conveniently discovered key felt less like evidence and more like a carefully prepared trap. We returned to the ballroom separately. Grant was waiting beside my chair, holding my leather document case. "Still collecting proof that everyone betrayed you?" he asked. Then he handed it back, lighter than it had been before. I opened the case beneath the table. One document was missing, but something else had been placed inside. An old photograph of Grant, Richard, and a man from my current investigation. On the back were 4 words: "You married into this." The third man was Owen Price, an accountant suspected of creating false vendor accounts for several family-owned businesses. I had been investigating him for 8 months. Until that moment, I had never known he was connected to Grant. The photograph was dated 11 years earlier, before Grant and I married. That meant his financial secrets hadn't started with our divorce. Whatever happened to my savings was only one part of something his family had operated for years. I found Natalie near the dance floor and showed her the photograph. She recognized Owen immediately. Grant had introduced him as an old family friend who recently helped organize their mortgage application and combine their finances. Natalie finally revealed what frightened her. 2 weeks earlier, a bank had called about paperwork she never submitted. When she questioned Grant, he produced her signature and insisted she had signed everything during their wedding preparations. If you've ever been told to doubt something you clearly remember, comment, "Trust yourself." Natalie had nearly accepted Grant's explanation until she discovered another woman's name buried inside the paperwork: mine. The missing document from my case contained a transaction connecting Owen to Richard's company. Fortunately, It was only a marked copy. The original was secured elsewhere, and the invisible mark would identify whoever tried to use it. I told Natalie we needed to let Grant believe he had won. She returned to the head table, held his hand, and smiled for the guests. Meanwhile, I slipped the locker key to the wedding coordinator. 10 minutes later, the coordinator returned with surprising news. The key didn't open a guest locker. It opened Richard's private wine cabinet, located inside the office where he had disappeared after the photographs. Inside the cabinet, we found Natalie's missing envelope, still sealed, beside my stolen document. Someone had placed both items there deliberately. Then footsteps stopped outside, and Richard's voice ordered the coordinator to unlock the door. Natalie and I escaped through the catering entrance seconds before Richard entered, but I left the marked document exactly where he expected to find it. The moment he touched it, the final stage of my plan began. Richard found the document and immediately called Owen. The coordinator's office camera captured him saying, "Caroline brought it, just like we planned." That sentence finally explained my invitation. They intended to blame the new fraudulent accounts on me. Grant hadn't invited me merely to humiliate me. His family needed photographs, witnesses, and my documents inside the building. If Natalie reported the forged paperwork, they would claim the bitter ex-wife had sabotaged his wedding. Natalie returned to the head table and asked the band to stop. Grant assumed she was preparing a surprise speech. Instead, she took the microphone and said, "Before we celebrate honesty, my husband should introduce Caroline properly." Grant laughed nervously and called me the woman who couldn't keep a marriage. Natalie looked directly at him. "That isn't what you told me," she said. Then she revealed that Grant had blamed me for debts carrying forged signatures. Grant accused Natalie of becoming paranoid because of me. I remained silent until Richard entered carrying my marked document. Then I asked one question. "Why were you hiding evidence stolen from my case inside your private cabinet?" The room fell silent. Richard claimed he had never seen the document, but the coordinator confirmed she watched him remove it from my case. Grant's smile disappeared when two bank investigators entered with the club's security manager. They weren't there to make a dramatic arrest. They were there to preserve records connected to an active fraud investigation. Owen had already agreed to cooperate that morning after learning Richard planned to place everything on him. Natalie removed her ring and placed it beside the unsigned marriage license. Then she opened the envelope recovered from Richard's cabinet. Inside was Grant's written plan connecting me to accounts I had never opened. Over the following months, Grant and Richard were charged with bank fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy. My name was formally cleared, Natalie recovered her stolen funds, and several other victims finally came forward with matching stories. Grant invited me so I could watch him marry a real wife. Instead, his bride walked away, and his oldest lie collapsed before everyone he wanted to impress. Subscribe if you believe the truth always deserves one final witness.